You want it? We have it. The hottest mortgage and real estate strategy broadcast in the nation. A Smarter Way Home with your host, Danielle Boote and Victor Bals. 50 years combined experience, ranked in the top 1% in the nation for home loan originations 2020. Promise to expand your knowledge, utilizing creative mortgage financing and home buying strategies. Build a bridge for a better quality of life. Get your brain cells firing for a smarter way home. And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to A Smarter Way Home, another episode. My name is Victor Bals. I am your host. I am a licensed loan officer, and we are here to bring you modern mortgage strategies and home buying strategies for consumers and real estate professionals alike. And I am here with my wonderful co-host, the Mrs. Danielle Boote, loan officer extraordinaire. How are we doing today, Danielle?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing very good.
I am super excited about our guest today.
Yeah, I am too. This is actually I'm gonna actually learn some stuff. I've been doing mortgages for a long time, but we have a title expert in here today, and we have Carole Bullion here with us today, and she's gonna answer a bunch of questions regarding title. But Carole is a certified instructor in Michigan for teaching continued education to real estate professionals on real estate law, National Association of Realtor Code of Ethics, and many other real estate subjects. She is also a title insurance expert and is often traveling the United States, speaking to real estate and title insurance associations on a variety of subjects, including RESPA compliance, foreclosures, team building, mortgage fraud, and closing services. She has written several industry-related articles in the national publications, including Recognizing Mortgage Fraud. And also, she is an author of a book that I did not know, The Dark Side of the Closing Room, which is available on Amazon. I didn't know that. Welcome, Carole Bullion. How are you?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, what is this book, The Dark Side of the Closing Room?
So I wrote the book actually about 10 years ago, and it is a compilation of stories. You may look at them as horror stories because we know the industry, but it's a funny book because some of the stories are funny. But what it is, it's a learning book, and it's to basically explain different things that can happen in your closing transaction that might be unexpected, but what happens, why it happens, and how to either avoid it happening, or if it does happen, how to successfully get past that issue to move to a successful closing.
Is this a consumer-driven or real estate professional-driven?
Actually,
what's it about?
I wrote it because I had all these stories from so many really decades of doing closings, not just my own, but from people like you in the industry. And a lot of them are actually comical. They were not comical at the time, but they're comical now. And it was originally for anybody that was going to be entering into a real estate transaction. But what I found it became a great training source for newer agents in the business, because it helped them understand, here are some very common things that could happen or could present a problem or a hurdle in your transaction, and how you can either avoid it or address it so it doesn't make your transaction blow up.
Okay, so let's go backwards a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Carole. Your family life. Where do you live? What do you do? What drives you?
Oh boy. So no one gets into title insurance, or I really think no one gets into the real estate industry on purpose. I think we all just kind of accidentally found ourselves in this industry, and that's exactly what happened to me. I actually got my real estate license in 1985. So I'm old. But I am from Livingston County, raised here. My husband and I together have 6 children, all in Livingston County. I've been in title. I owned my own title company until 2010.
Classic title, if I remember.
Classic title, yes. I actually opened my own title company with a 3-week-old baby.
Oh.
Yeah, if you want to do, if you, I'm a little bit crazy. You guys already probably know that about me, but I did. I thought I've always wanted to open my own company, and I did it. And I had a 3-week-old in tow, and I'm proud to say that I was really successful. I mean, I opened the doors with a pretty decent sized business. Now, mind you, I was typing commitments and holding a newborn, but we did it. And I was open until I had a couple companies that said, hey, you know what? maybe you don't have to do all the daily in and outs. You need to be out there. You need to be working with people and helping them with their understanding of a transaction and education, and, which led me to a really one of my biggest accomplishments in my life. And that is being a co-author, the original author and co-author of the ethics training for the American Land Title Association, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but at the time that it was required of us on the education committee to write it, we had a lot of issues, and Congress was looking at, hey, title company, you've got some practices that we're not particularly happy about, and you don't have an ethics program. And so I wrote it, took it back to the committee. We kind of tweaked it, and I got to present it to members of Congress. So it's very exciting for me. So
very good.
So that I didn't aspire to be in the industry, but this industry has been amazing to me and my family.
It's a wonderful industry. So let's talk a little bit about, you're at Liberty Title, and they are statewide. Talk about Liberty Title, their locations, and
sure.
What areas do you serve?
So Liberty Title is not just in Michigan. We have 2 offices in Florida on Oceanside at Delray Beach area. Up here in Michigan, we cover the entire state. So we have 12 offices in southeastern Michigan, from East Lansing over to Port Huron, down to Sterling Heights, over basically to Brighton. We do also quite a bit of work on the west side. So we have 12 offices here. We're all interconnected. The company's been around, in the early 70s. It's family owned. As you probably saw, I don't know if you saw, but last week we're really excited. We were number 8 in the top places to work in the state of Michigan. So we were pretty excited about that. So they're very family oriented.
I think we have the other top 7.
You probably do. But we were excited about that.
Okay, so let's get into title insurance. Let's explain to our listeners, especially our home buyers or home sellers, what is title insurance? Why does one need it?
Oh, gosh. And this is something that I actually explain to people almost every single day. There's a lot of misconception about title insurance. And the biggest thing is, oh, my gosh, it's a chunk of change at the closing. And why am I having to get this? So I'll start out by saying title insurance is like every insurance except for one major difference. And that is title insurance is the only type of insurance that covers the past, what happened before we got to this point. Why is that important? Well, a lot of people think, I can't find the title to my house. Carole, I can't find my title. A title to a house or real property isn't a piece of paper like what you'd get for a car or an RV or a boat. A title in the real estate world is it's a bundle of rights of ownership to use real property the way you want to use them. So title insurance, when you buy a piece of land, that land isn't like a car that's just been manufactured. That land has been here the whole time since, Earth was created. So there have been many, many, many owners. There have been many uses on that land. So what title insurance does is it makes sure that that piece of land is examined to making sure every owner prior to this one, their interests have been satisfied so that no one can come forward, right, and say, hey, I had interest in this property. I was never paid what I was due. Now they have a lien or a claim on the property. It also will check to make sure there's no liens that have been placed against the property, maybe mortgages that haven't been discharged, maybe federal tax liens. Also, how is this property restricted with regards to the use? Are there building and use restrictions on the property? Is there a right-of-way or oil and gas leases? Anything that would restrict that owner from being able to use the property the way that they want to. And what title insurance does is we do what's a 40-year search, which is pretty much the American Land Title Association standard for feeling that we've gone far enough to ascertain whether there's any outside interests. And then we put together a document called a commitment that shows exactly not only the requirements that we need to take care of so that your buyer, if you're the buyer, gets clear and marketable title, but we also will give you a list of what's on that property that is not going to be covered, like an oil and gas leak, like an ingress egress easement, right of way. And so it's a little snapshot of what we need to make sure a buyer gets clear title. Why does a buyer want clear title to the real property? It's because clear and marketable title is more valuable. If you've got issues on your title, you are not going to get the market rate, the market price for your property. You're just not. And that's what title insurance insures that buyer that they're buying.
Okay, so so there's two types of title insurance. There is the owner's policy, and then there is the lender's policy, which we obtain. Could you explain what the two differences are and who it protects?
Absolutely. And well, typically in Michigan, the owner's policy and title insurance, it's paid by the seller most of the time. However, the buyer is going to be the one that's insured because the buyer is going to get this title policy that will cover them if anything comes forward from the past.
So
maybe something the seller didn't know about that it
So
happens.
when one sells a home, they supply the new buyer with
Yes.
an owner's title policy,
Absolutely, yes.
ensuring them that there are no liens or clouds or anything. You want clear
Correct.
title. There's no
Correct.
interest in
Correct.
the property.
They also sign a warranty deed, and a lot of people wonder what the difference between a warranty deed and a quitclaim deed is. But the warranty deed is actually the seller saying, I'm warranting the condition of title for the period of time that I owned it. Okay, so and that is going to cover the buyer because let's say something happened that the seller may have known. Maybe the seller had a bankruptcy, or maybe there was an old mortgage of the seller out there and they warranted it, everything's fine. And then we find out everything's not fine. The perfect thing about title insurance is that buyer is going to be covered. The title insurance company is going to protect that buyer and they're going to fight to get clear title legally. However, with the warranty deed, if the seller didn't maybe disclose everything that could be a problem that comes forward later, just by the virtue of the seller signing a warranty deed, they're warranting that title, which means they're liable, they're culpable for anything that they could have caused as an issue or an encumbrance against that property.
Okay, and does something ever pop up after a person buys a home on title and all of a sudden there's some lien that pops up out of nowhere?
Absolutely. So the only liens that title companies can actually disclose on the title commitment are the ones that have been recorded at the Register of Deeds or at the county clerk office if there's a bankruptcy or a divorce or things like that, name change. So does it happen? Are there claims against title? Every single day. People don't realize the value of having a title policy until they need it. Because if someone comes forward, and I've seen it many times, that says, I'll give you a great example. A transaction where a guy was selling his property. He bought it for the right amount, the market value in 1981, and he paid what he needed to pay. Of course, they didn't get title insurance. They didn't use a title company. He just took a deed from a woman that owned it. Well, little did he know that the woman owned the property with her 3 siblings, and she just sold it out from underneath them. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened with that, but here he is trying to sell his property, and we're saying, she only had 1/4 interest to sell to you when she sold you the property. Now we need to look for the 3 other siblings. Are they alive?
40
No.
years later.
40 years later, not a one of them were alive. And then we went to, oh gosh, do they have any heirs? Because if they are gone, we have to look at their heirs. And 3 of them did not. Luckily, one was a nun and one was a priest. We had no heirs there. But of course, the youngest son had 3 heirs. And so it took me 6 months to clear that title. But had he gotten title insurance, they would have seen that deed covered 3 more people instead of the woman that sold him the property. So and that's just one example.
So
of
how did you
many
resolve that? Did you have to buy them out, or?
So we got very, very lucky. It did take quite a while. I was able to locate one of the daughters of the youngest son. Initially, of course, the first thing I'm going to say is, my aunt screwed my dad out of that property. We don't want to help. That was the initial reaction. And as she took some time to think about it, it wasn't the seller that did anything. And luckily, she talked her other siblings into signing quitclaim deeds, and we got quitclaim deeds from all 3 of them, and we cleared title and we could close. But it took 6 months.
I had a client, he had paid cash $350,000 for a home, did not obtain title insurance. He came to me 2 years after the fact and says, hey, Vic, I want to pull some cash out of the house. We took application. We got title. There was a $240,000 lien on that property,
oh, my gosh. The seller never paid off.
The seller never paid off. Yeah. So
and IRS liens are a big problem.
Yeah.
Really?
IRS is a very big problem. A lot of people don't realize that the person you're buying property from, if they have any IRS issues or state of Michigan tax issues, that attaches to the property they own. period. And it doesn't matter that they're no longer the owner. It doesn't matter. It attaches that property until the IRS or the state of Michigan has been made whole. So you may be thinking, great, I got such a great deal. I got this little piece of land for $50,000. Well, guess what? You may have a $75,000 IRS tax lien on the property.
And the IRS takes
all
number
of it.
one.
Well, back in the day, if you think, 75, 100 years ago, especially in Livingston County being a farming community, it was almost a handshake, right?
No doubt.
Farmer Jones bought some land from Farmer Smith, and they've known each other their whole lives. I mean, how do you know who anybody is? We're in such a global society that we have people from out of state, out of the country coming to buy properties. We want to know. We need to know. The title company also validates everyone's identity. That the buyers are really the buyer, the seller's really the seller. The real estate agents are licensed and appropriate people to be working on the transaction. There's a lot of work to be done. One of the things that kind of always cracks me up, and we don't see a lot of for sale by owners, but how many times when a for sale by owner lands in our lap, the sellers have no idea what to do. The buyers have no idea what to do. And they're looking at the lender going, well, what are we going to do? And I'm going to go, well, you're going to call a local title company because there's a lot of work to be done.
A lot.
And the real estate agents normally do some of it. If it's a for sale by owner, it's going to get all dumped on the title company and the lender to get that transaction closed. And people don't understand. And it is expense. There is a huge expense. And when we do a loan estimate for a client, we have to disclose the lender fees. And they'll always go, well, why do we need that? Well, this is why.
Absolutely.
To protect yourself. It's not a car. It's not a boat. This is the largest purchase in your lifetime.
No doubt. When you talk about people saying, wow, that premium, that's a high amount. What people don't understand is that it's a one-time premium for the entire time they own the property. So if you own the property for 10 years or 40 years, your title policy is good for that entire period of time. Right. So I agree with you. And for sale by owners, people in this last market we've had in the last 2 or 3 years, they have been able to sell their home, much quicker than they would in just a pretty much a more stable market, if you will. However, they're all excited at first until we get midway into the transaction when they start realizing that, oh, well, I didn't know I needed to do that. And what do you mean I need to do this? And then they get frustrated and upset with the lender, with the title company, but they don't realize that the realtor's doing a lot of the job when they hire a realtor. And it's like, I have to be the one to say, I'm not your realtor. You've got to do these things because you didn't hire someone to do it for you. So it's tough, but we work through it.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. So what are some of the nightmare now? Could I?
Oh, Lord.
Oh, yeah. That'll be a real long show.
6-hour show.
Yeah,
Carol, sorry, we got to buy you lunch and dinner.
I didn't bring lunch.
Okay. Well, Danielle brought up a question about marital status. Yeah. Why does marital status matter when obtaining title? Because when we do a loan application, we have to ask their marital status.
Right.
And that's a loaded question these days, but I was telling Vic that I actually had a first-time homebuyer that was very upset with me after I asked her the question. She thought I was being nosy and I was judging her. And all I said was, I need to know your marital status. We don't ask the question anymore to say, are you single, married, divorced, widowed? Right? That's what we used to ask many years ago. Now we just ask, what is your marital status? And I did explain to her why it mattered.
That's a tricky subject. So it used to be so there was something in Michigan that we were one of the last holdout states called dower. Right. And I know you guys know this. And a dower right is the wife's right to her husband's property when she's not an owner. And it was antiquated. It was from, the 18th and 19th century where women didn't earn money. And when they got married, they needed to have a place to live. And if the husband died or just took off, she would be homeless with her children. So there was a really good reason that dower existed. Now that was abolished, I want to say 2015 or 16. I mean, I think everything was just last year, but I realize years are going by quickly. So we don't have dower anymore, but marital status is really important for homestead reasons. That's one of the reasons. So homestead in the state of Michigan, and you were talking about getting loans. So in the state of Michigan, one spouse, like let's say the husband is the only one that can qualify for the mortgage, but the wife, of course, is going to be on the deed and she wants to be there too. If that husband is getting the mortgage on his own, The wife needs to acknowledge that mortgage because that's her homestead. And the reason that the state of Michigan does that is because if, let's say, the husband goes out, he's on title and he gets an equity loan. Maybe he has a gambling problem, all right? Or maybe he just went and bought a big purchase that she doesn't know about. And he gets an $80,000 loan and blows it. Well, then he doesn't pay. He doesn't want to tell the wife, guess what? I just took $80,000 equity out. I just blew it. So he just doesn't make the payments. Maybe he loses his job. Well, if it goes into foreclosure, that wife now is going to lose her home. And so homestead rights will say that if a married man is getting a mortgage on a property, specifically on refinances because they already own the home, right, that the wife has to acknowledge it so she understands there's another debt or a debt against the property that could result in her losing her home. So that's one of the reasons. The other reasons for for marital status is asset. So we, on my end of it, if people are married, I need to know. I also need to know if they've been married during the time that they've owned the home. Because let's say Mr. and Mrs. Smith, let's say Mr. Smith bought property. And I keep blaming the men. It's not always the men, but I'm saying, let's say Mr. Smith bought the property.
Mr. Smith has been in a lot of
He's
trouble.
been all over. Yeah, that's what he gets. No. So Mr. Smith bought property. And then 2 years later, he marries Mrs. Smith, right? So then they have this wonderful relationship for about 7 years. That's about a long, right? The marriages are
That
fun
is a
and
long one.
Yeah, a long one. So 7 years, they end up getting divorced. And now she was never added to title, right? Mr. Smith has the only one been entitled to his property this whole time. However, that divorce might have had stipulations that if it maybe gives her an interest in the sale, maybe it gives her an amount that's due her on the sale of the home, maybe it's a lien. But that divorce decree is something that we're going to need to know about because that is a lien. It's an interest against title.
And it's a legal recorded document.
Correct. Absolutely. So,
But how does that divorce decree, if that's recorded, and let's say
it's
she was
not recorded.
Oh, okay. And let's say she was awarded a part interest in that house, how would you as a title company find that out and not have this be a nightmare post-closing?
Well, and because one of the reasons, if there's someone entitled, one of the questions is, have you been married?
Okay.
Have you been married? And if they're dishonest, and then we have this problem down the road, well, guess what? They sign an owner's affidavit. So we are like, yeah, you were dishonest, or maybe you didn't understand the questions on an affidavit. But yes, so if we find out they've been married during the interim of the time of owning it, then we will require a divorce decree. And they are not recorded at the Register of Deeds. They're at the circuit court, okay, at the clerk's office. However, sometimes when they're battling during a divorce, one was supposed to sign over the house to the other spouse in a divorce, and sometimes they don't. They're not getting along. Luckily, the divorce judgments are written now to where just recording at the Register of Deeds that divorce decree works the same as a deed transferred from one to the other.
Okay, so a question.
Yeah.
Supposing I was out to go out and buy another home. I'm a married man. Does my wife have to acknowledge that?
When you're buying another home, if you're buying the home and you don't have already any interest in the home, no, but your marital status will be on there.
Okay, so she would be entitled to that part of that home?
She would be entitled, so she wouldn't be entitled. Where she would come in is a marital asset. Okay. So, yeah. So even though there's a lot of people think, well, we're getting divorced, but guess what? The house is in my name. Well, guess what? The house, if it's a marital asset, is a part of the divorce.
Until they settle it.
Absolutely.
Who's getting what?
The judge is going to decide.
So now, let's say my wife goes out and buys a home as a married woman. Do I have to acknowledge it? Is there any difference?
Buying it, if you're using all of the money to purchase it to get it into your name, homestead does not apply. The minute you have ownership in it, it does. So to purchase it, right, as long as you're not taking any cash out or doing anything like that, yes. The minute you own it, if she goes out after you own it, nope, yeah, homestead applies and you would have to acknowledge it.
And doesn't homestead only apply to your primary residence?
Yes, it does legally. However, you now have to have documentation showing that it's not going to be your homestead. And let me tell you why. Because I had a situation where there was a spouse that was serving a life sentence in prison, which, I mean, chances are, I mean, he's not coming back to the homestead. It didn't matter. I had to go to the prison to have him sign an affidavit that he wasn't going to be coming back to that, which was delightful.
Wow.
But so just so you know, you still have to sign documentation that it's not your homestead, just so that we know for sure.
Okay, and since we're on the homestead thing here, explain what homesteading versus non-homestead is for our listeners for property tax reasons.
So in the state of Michigan, your property is either qualifies for the principal residence exemption. We call it the PRE, which means it's your primary residence. That's where you live. Okay. And then non-PRE, that's non-homesteaded, would be, it could be a second home. I have a house up north. That's my, that's a second home for us. So there's a difference. We get a tax savings on our property taxes on the homestead home, but not on the non-homestead. So we pay full rate in taxes on the second home. The savings are usually, it's a school tax. Your school tax drops down considerably if you have the homesteaded tax rate. And it's anywhere between 25 to 40%, depending on which municipality the property's in.
Okay, on that homestead and non-homestead, I've had clients say, well, you know what, I'm going to homestead this one. My wife is going to homestead the home up north so we don't get whacked on taxes. I hear a lot of that, more often than
Absolutely.
not. How does that play out?
So can a married couple each claim, could my husband claim homestead on our home here and I claim the homestead up north? We could if we file separately, our tax returns separately. Okay, then you're able to, as long as you can show utility bills that someone's actively living there,
driver's license, address.
Absolutely, they're gonna look at everything, because remember, it's not that they don't want you to have the homestead, but they also want to have the taxes, right? So now, for us, filing separately would cost more than both of us taking a homestead in these properties. Right. And that's the case in a majority of the time. So if you're filing jointly, you get one homestead, that's all.
That's all. Okay, many people nowadays have living trust, okay? And we always suggest, or we at least mention the fact that they may want to quit claim deed their home into a living trust. Can you explain what that means and what that entails?
Sure. So it's funny, even about 10 years ago, we had a very small number of people that owned their property in trust. Now, fast forward to 2021, I would say a good 25+% of the properties and the transactions we have are properties held in trust. Financial planners and attorneys will suggest, and it's not right for everyone, right? They need to go to their attorney or their financial planner, but there's a lot of good things that the trust can do. It can shield from some liability. It helps if, God forbid, the owner passes away and no one else is entitled. So it avoids probate. It spells out what they want to happen with the property. One thing I'd like to caution is people think just because they open up a trust and they name the property in that trust, that their real property's in the trust. And that's not the case. In the state of Michigan, okay, the only way you can convey real property is by a document called, it's a conveyance deed, like a warranty deed, a quitclaim deed, a trustee's deed, or by order of the court. That's the only way you can convey real property. So it just doesn't magically float from the trust, or, from itself into the trust. You have to deed it from yourself as individuals into the trust. A lot of people miss that. So when you own your property in the trust, a very important thing to remember is you no longer own that property individually. Your trust, the entity, is the owner of that property. Yes, you may be the trustee and can act on behalf of the trust, but that trust is the entity. What does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to be signing as trustee. So all the documents you sign, you have to do, trustee, you're acting in that capacity. But the biggest thing that throws people is, number one, we have to have an entire copy of the trust. It has to be updated with any amendments that you've got. A certificate of trust existence needs to be prepared and filed along with it, as well as the check they're going to get is going to be in the name of the trust. So if Mr. and Mrs. Smith's trust own the property, we're making the check out of all their proceeds to the trust. So they need to make sure that they have a bank account set up in the trust's name. We cannot make the proceeds out to an individual if they don't own the property.
And would it be true then if prior to the closing they quit claim deeded out of the trust, now it's back in an individual name? Does that make things simpler for the individual or the title company?
No. So I would say no. Every single case is individual. So when someone says, hey, should I take my property out of the trust or should I put it into the trust? I always tell them everyone's situation is unique. It benefits some people to take it out of the trust, and it might harm some people to take it out of the trust. It depends on your whole situation. So that is a question that I have them ask either their attorney or their financial planner.
You know, you spoke about deeds and stuff. Could you explain what a Ladybird deed is?
Oh, okay. Yes, it's so funny because one of my favorite classes is called Dirty Deeds. and you know the song we play like AC/DC, we get ramped up for Con Ed, we be going. And the reason I called it Dirty Deeds is because, oh my goodness, you've got to have a professional prepare your deed. I'll talk about quitclaim deeds first. Quitclaim deeds are great for fixing, like, you know, mending some issues, maybe an error, maybe a missigned name, maybe, I mean, it's just to fix title. But everyone uses quitclaim deeds all over the place, and they prepare them wrong. They don't put marital status or how people are holding title, and that's another whole podcast, how people hold title. But then they do it incorrectly. And Ladybird, don't ever do a Ladybird deed on your own. It is so incredibly complicated that you absolutely have to have a real estate attorney that understands what that is, prepare it. So Ladybird comes from one of our past first ladies, and she was the one actually that started all of it. And she, what a Ladybird deed does, if I'm in title, and I want my kids, I don't want to have to go to probate, right? If anything happens where I become, you know, my
vegetable.
I'm not saying I'm not a vegetable, but I'm incompetent.
Yeah.
Or I die.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I want to make it easy so that the property is going to go to whoever I want it to go seamlessly. So what a Ladybird deed does, it would be me, and it would be conveying it to whoever I want. Let's say it's all of 6 children, right? And they're going to hold title as that once I die. So that deed gets recorded, but it doesn't actually become operative, is the word, until I die. Because I'm granting the home and the property to my children, but I'm reserving the right to live there, to mortgage it, to sell it, to do whatever I want during my lifetime. But upon my death, that deed becomes operative, and my kids are the owners, and it doesn't have to go to court.
Is it only upon your death, or let's say you become incompetent?
So I become incompetent, and that's why it's so important for an attorney to prepare the deed, because it has to be spelled out very black and white. There can't be gray. And if you think there's no gray in real estate and title, I can show you
It's a favorite color.
It's
right?
a favorite color. And if you think everyone gets along in a family, you wait until someone with money dies. Okay?
So
because
now,
they don't.
So if you got a Ladybird deed
Yes.
that doesn't spell out incompetency, but yet you have a living trust with the medical power of attorneys, how does that all blend together with a Ladybird deed?
So a Ladybird deed is only operative, remember, upon her death. So if she's incompetent, it doesn't take place yet. So that means she's still in title. She can still live there. Nobody can force her out. When they become incompetent like that, hopefully we know she's headed down that road, right? A lot of times it's Alzheimer's or it's dementia where people start working on the estate. You go to the estate planner, the attorney. They're going to prepare what's called a durable power of attorney. And a durable power of attorney is specifically used for someone that can't make decisions on their own.
Okay.
And it's durable, which means there's no ending date. Because mom may be fine now, but she might not be fine next year.
You brought up a statement there about a Ladybird deed. It goes to whoever you dictate it's going to go
Correct.
to upon your death. So Mr. Smith has 2 sons. And he Ladybirds it only to one son. Could the other son then go to probate court with that and say, look, this isn't right. I'm entitled to half that property?
So you can always go to court.
Okay.
You can always go to court. And however the judge decides is really up to the judge. That being said, the judge is going to look at probably several things. They're going to look at this Ladybird, which the intent was for one son. And they're going to, hopefully there's a will, because if there's a Ladybird, chances are the estate attorney was working on a will. The will spell things out. A lot of judges will see if if a child's been left out completely, that's going to be a little bit of a tougher case because maybe the parent forgot a child. But if the parent really didn't want the child to get something, they would put the child in the will and give them a small amount, like $1 or something like that, just so the court doesn't
acknowledge the fact that they know they have a son.
They acknowledge the fact that they're acknowledging all the children, and this is what they get. I would like to stop here and just add for everyone out there that a will does not convey real property. I get this all the time, or, hey, my dad passed away. I'm the one he left it to in the will, and I've just signed a purchase agreement, and we need to close. And it's like, was anyone entitled with dad? Because a will cannot transfer real property. A deed transfers real property. And who's going to sign that deed? Well, I'm in the will, so I'm going to sign that deed. Dead people can't sign. So now that's when you have to go to probate, and the judge is going to order who's able to sign as a personal representative.
So probate typically takes about 6 months minimum.
Yes, and the probate depends on, when you notify all the potential heirs, right, or any interested parties, how long they get a certain period of time to respond to that complaint. But then it's the docket. I mean, I can tell you in Livingston County, with COVID and that, I mean, the docket, they're doing a great job, but it just depends on how many cases they get into, how long it's going to take, and if any of the kids are fighting or contesting it, and they do, that matters as well.
Wow, very interesting. You spoke of deeds. What's the difference between a deed and a warranty deed, and what happens when someone finally pays off their mortgage? What happens?
So, as I said earlier, there's different types of deeds. There's a warranty deed. The quitclaim deed, I already said, is just to clean it up, like a misspelling, or maybe there was a legal description had an error on it, a typo. Maybe someone didn't sign off and we're just cleaning title up.
So, but when I'm buying a house, what is that right there?
You want the warranty deed.
That is the warranty deed when you buy a home.
You do not settle for anything other than a warranty deed if it's an individual seller, because you want them to warrant the marketable title from the time that they owned it. However, you're going to you may get a special warranty deed or a covenant deed, and that is going to come from a property that the bank owns. You might get a trustee's deed, and that would be maybe it's sold through a bankruptcy. I mean, so there are different types of deeds, but you want to make sure, this is the most important part, that when you are closing on a house, you look at the deed before you close. You want to make sure your name's spelled right. You want to make sure your marital status is right. You want to make sure, if I'm taking title with someone that's not my husband, do I want to be joint tenants so we both have equal ownership? Right? If I die, that they get the whole thing, or do I want to have a tenants in common vesting to where if I die, my heirs get my 50% and my other co-tenant their heirs get 50%. So it's a lot of decisions, but you want to make sure. And let me tell you why. I'll tell you why you want.
Tell me why,
I'll
Carole.
tell you why.
I want to know why.
So just the beginning of this year, we had a transaction, and there was a woman that bought a bank-owned home. 6 years back, when foreclosures were going, and her elderly dad was going to be living with her, right? So she actually added him to title just in case, because if she's entitled by herself and she dies, now it goes to probate. The judge decide who gets what. So she decided to add her elderly dad on the property with her on the deed. She did not look at the deed when she got it because they had the same last name. The title company assumed they were husband and wife, right? Well, they're not. They're daughter and dad. So what happens? So dad passes away. Because they were not husband and wife, in the state of Michigan, if there's no tenancy or the tenancy is incorrect, it automatically converts to what's called a tenants in common, meaning daughter had her 50% ownership and dad would have his 50% ownership. So when dad died, dad's heirs had the rights to his ownership, which was her, but also the two sisters that she didn't speak to. Now, mind you, this was all the money that she put into this home. It was all her money. And now her two sisters that she had no relationship with
have a claim,
and they're most likely going to get whatever's owed them from her house and her money. So it's really important. People don't take the time to look at some of those really important things, and I wish they did.
So you guys are the unspoken heroes of the actual real estate transactions. I mean, I'm getting scared now. I want to go home and look at all my paperwork.
Well, especially back when we had the foreclosure crisis back in 2009, 10, 11. I had a client that bought a property on some acreage in northern Livingston County somewhere, and the legal description was wrong, and nobody caught it. So he thought he was buying a parcel of land with a house, and then there was other vacant land nearby. Well, the situation that had occurred, I mean, it took us forever to figure this out. He buys this property and closes, and then somebody shows up at his doorstep and says, "Oh no, can you move your stuff? We own that property." So the prior owner that we believe maybe passed away or something had a foreclosure, had changed the deed on their original property description several times. So they owned more land. They kept splitting it off. And in the process of refinancing, which is what this woman had done several times, she refinanced the parcel the last time, which is the mortgage that was eventually foreclosed on a wrong legal description. So it literally shorted this guy like an acre of land. And then there was this little strip of land. And it was interesting was that other family members owned the other parcels of land, but here you had a voided strip. And I don't ever know what happened there, but that was a very sticky situation. And and we were able to look at it and see, I pulled all of her mortgages and all of the deed history, and you were able to match it up and go, well, wait a minute. She did all these weird deeds, changed these legal descriptions. I mean, I did not get to the point of looking into seeing if she ever did that legally with the township or the county. But again, that property was foreclosed, and he was buying what he thought was his property, and it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be.
Exactly. I have one very similar, and it's right here in Livingston County. It's not too long ago where same thing. There's a property listed from a broker that's been in the business forever and does a great job. Property listed, and the bank listed it because it was a foreclosure, and it's a house with 20 acres, right? And of course the buyer is like, I've got horses. I need 20 acres to be able to house my horses. Yay. Okay. And so now, mind you, a legal description doesn't say 20 acres. So you have to really know how to figure out by looking at a legal description, how much property's in there, which, title companies don't know that they're expecting 20 acres. So fast forward to find out that the bank said 20 acres, the broker promoted 20 acres, the buyer bought it, relying on the 20 acres, only to find out that bank only had a mortgage on 5 of the acres, that owner that got foreclosed on had the other 15 and still owned the other 15. So this woman now has a house with 5 acres, and she can't keep her horses. So that is still, I believe, in court. That is going to be a big loss for probably many people. But it was just as simple as understanding, hey, if I don't know how to read this legal description, can I go to someone that does? And am I buying 5 acres? Right. Or am I buying 20
So let's talk about surveys. Okay.
Yeah.
Those of us that have been in the business for over 30 years know that back in the day, we had to get a mortgage survey on every property we closed, including homes on lots in a subdivision where we knew the land boundaries weren't going to change, but we always had a mortgage survey. In the last, I would say 15 years, maybe, the title companies insure over boundaries, and no one gets surveys anymore. Still to this day, occasionally we'll get them on new construction. Other states still require them. For instance, Florida does require them on all transactions.
Lakefront, don't we?
We don't require them anymore even on lakefront, but I have seen issues with lakefront, particularly in Livingston County, for instance, where you don't own the waterfront. Somebody else owns the waterfront. If you don't have a survey, you don't know. Our neighbor at the lake just ran into this when he tore down an old cottage and built a new house. And but when you look at the foreclosure situation with acreage, if that buyer would have just gotten a survey prior to closing, you would have resolved it. You don't know how can you, again, reading a legal description is not easy. And I think we were taught in real estate back in the 80s.
I actually have a class about writing. I had the realtors all drawing it out. It was fun.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody really knows how to do that anymore. So if you don't have a survey, particularly in a situation, I mean, I really think that there's a huge importance to that. And again, nobody wants to spend the money, but this is your biggest purchase. You want to know if you're buying 5 acres or 20 acres.
Especially on a waterfront. If you ever buy a waterfront, I would never buy a waterfront property without a survey.
Well, let's talk about surveys. There are mortgage surveys, then there are stake surveys. Could you explain the two differences and a ballpark difference in cost?
Okay, so a mortgage survey, or they call it a mortgage report in a lot of cases, is going to be a lot less expensive. And I want to say you can get them, for $400, $500, $600.
Well, $250.
Okay, then
$250 to $500.
Perfect. Then I'm going to call you for that contact. So, but what that mortgage surveyor, or what that surveyor does for the mortgage report, is they basically, a lot of times they'll use them on platted property, right? So they know, like you said, the boundary lines aren't going to change, and they kind of go by and they'll take a picture. They don't put stakes in and stake it out. They don't. So a lot of times they don't get out of the vehicle.
So is it true or is it right to say that a mortgage survey gets you within a couple feet of the lines and it just sees if there's any encroachments and stuff?
Well, yeah, but it depends on how narrow that lot is, because you really have to stake things out if you've got a narrow lot. They're also looking for any outbuildings or maybe a swimming pool or something that's been added to the property that could be an encroachment, and not just an encroachment on the property line, but encroachment on easements. People don't realize they have utility easements on their property, and if they put up a pole barn or put in a swimming pool, they got to make sure that they're within
the window,
the window. Boundary line surveys, stake surveys, a lot of people call them. Now they're expensive. They're at least $2,000. They can go all the way up. I've seen them as high as $30,000 in commercial and things like that. But that's where the surveyor is actually going out and finding the rods and the stakes and staking it all out, and then reviewing all of the easements and different things and right-of-ways that are on the property, so that and they certify it. They certify it to the title company, and they certify it to whoever pays for it.
To the legal description, too, to make sure everything is...
The legal description, they'll give you a complete drawing on where the house, if there is one, situated, and the garage, and the pole barn. If there's any fences can be encroachments as well. So they're going to give you the whole picture and the correct legal description on the property, so you know exactly what you're getting.
Well, to me, it seems like if that person buying that horse farm, or if you're buying any acreage, and you don't know how to read legals, get a stake survey just to make sure that what it says on paper, you're getting 20 acres, you're getting 20 acres.
But Danielle's right. They don't want to pay for it. So, I get it. But that's what,
Yeah, but...
What's a couple grand when you're spending $500,000 on a house?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we understand that because we see the fallout.
Yeah.
Well, I had a crazy situation I was telling Vic and Monica about before you got here. And several years ago, I had a client who was making payments to his mortgage company. This was like 15 years ago. And one day they just mailed him back like 4 payments. And then they initiated foreclosure proceedings. Kid you not. And the mortgage company is no longer in business. And he had to file bankruptcy papers to stay the foreclosure, so that his attorney could turn around and sue the mortgage company.
I believe it.
And I got involved in it several years after it happened, because he was going to sell his house and buy a new one. And of course I had to go, well, you filed bankruptcy. What happened? But it never discharged or anything. So, there's just a lot of crazy things that can happen. And you go, thank God we don't hear about that nightmare frequently, but you go, you know what? Title is important. I also had another a client earlier this year that wanted to refinance her house. And she bought this house, sold it on land contract to her son and his family so that he could file the homestead. And they lived there a long time.
To save money on taxes.
The son decided, and his wife decided to move. They job transfer. They moved to Ohio. And the mom was at the time where she said, you know what, I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to move into the condo. Okay, great. Then she calls me and says, hey, Danielle, I want to refinance. I'm fixing up the condo. I'm moving into it. I'm like, okay, great. She's got great credit, great income, no question, slam dunk refinance until we get the title. Mm-hmm. The son was self-employed, had a federal tax lien with the IRS.
And that's what happens because they transfer that interest in
Now,
the land contract.
when he went to Ohio, he quit claimed off the title. So now this guy is not on title, but because he was, the IRS lien is now clouding the title to her home.
I have one just like that.
Wow.
With one in town, and he sold his property on land contract. They defaulted. They destroyed the house. You're looking at $40,000, $50,000 in damage. And I'm not saying that land contracts are bad. It's a wonderful vehicle. But when you decide to sell your house, and if you're going to sell it on land contract, that gives someone title interest, not fee simple title, not absolute ownership, but it gives them an interest that is lienable, where a lien will attach, and that lien stays on there, and then she's going to be now dealing with the IRS.
Go back. I'm trying to get this straight. So mom quit claim deeds the son onto the title.
Yep.
The son's business crashes and burns. He gets in hock with the IRS. They see that he owns property. He's on title. They slap that lien on, and then he quit claim deeds off and splits.
Right. And his business didn't crash and burn. He just screwed up the taxes, and he was paying the IRS back, but I think he owed them like 15 or 20 grand.
Okay, and until that's gone, that lien is, so mom's stuck with that lien. Either she pays it off, or he pays it off, or they got to wait till the lien is paid off through them.
And it gets it gets a little more complicated than that, but the IRS is not going to deal with mom.
Right.
Because mom, even though she's the owner, mom gave her son an interest, and he's the taxpayer. So the IRS nor the state of Michigan will talk to anybody but the taxpayer. So at least this is son. Right. Because in the case that I have, this is a guy that defaulted, trashed the house, and you can't get a hold of him, right? So now it's going to court.
Right.
So, and it's not just state and federal tax liens that it can attach. There could be judgments from creditors, like a Discover card or a Visa or whatever. I mean, there could be anything that attached because of that ownership interest.
Wow, we could get deep here. I want to move on to, we're going to wrap it up here in a bit, but I want to go on to two small items here. Well, I don't know if they're small, but on television, I see protect your title. People could put liens on and all that stuff. You know, what is that all about? What are they selling, and is it needed? What does they call it? Title protect or theft protect? Or
there's all kinds of
title
things.
Lock.
But everything that comes out, it's a fear. You know, right now, I mean, you don't need me to tell you that fear sells. I mean, our media loves it, right? Fear sells. People click. They're like, oh, what's going on? So there are companies that, because real estate fraud, you know that's one of my specialties. Yep. So real estate and mortgage fraud, because it was so prevalent for a long period of time, these companies are like, hey, if you pay a certain amount, we're going to verify that your title's clear, that nobody has recorded anything that could cause you, that is fraudulent, that could cause you a problem down the road. Now, in Livingston County and in a lot of other counties, we have a fraud alert program that is absolutely free to everyone that owns property in Livingston County. All you have to do is contact our Register of Deeds office, and they will alert you when something's recorded against your property free of charge. It costs nothing. You register your name, and they'll ask a couple questions and your email address, and you will get an email saying, hey, Carol, there was just a deed, that was recorded on whatever my address is. Okay. It's awesome, and it's free, and every single homeowner should do that in Livingston, but a lot of counties do that.
Okay, so
you don't need to pay.
So I get an email. I find out that there was just a deed recorded or some mortgage recorded on my house. Is that just like, oh boy, now I got to do something because I didn't do that.
Well, right. So if you didn't do that, there's been fraud. And the good thing about fraud, any type of fraud, is nip it in the bud early. These companies that are trying to sell you for like $75 or $90, they're only just going to look at your title. They're not going to protect you in any way. They're just going to tell you if something was recorded. So the county's already doing that. So if you find out, you get an email that someone's recorded something against your property, you need to act immediately. You need to get a copy of that document. You need to find who did it, why they did it, and then you immediately need to contact them and tell them to remove it immediately. If they do not, they are guilty of what's called slander of title. And they will get sued, and they will lose because if you ask them, you have to ask them to remove it, because it could have been something where they used the wrong legal description. Maybe you're at lot 11 and they were looking at lot 12.
Oh, could it be my neighbor's house?
It could be it could be a mistake, right? And they have to correct it because they've just now clouded your title. If they refuse to correct it, then you have you need to see an attorney about suing for a slander of title.
Wow. Okay. Forget I asked that question. Sorry.
But no, go to the Livingston County Registered of Deeds
Yeah.
website and you can sign up for that free
It's amazing.
service.
I'm gonna
I
do
just
that.
had
Really
it happen
is
on mine.
cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. One of your favorite topics is wire fraud. Can you just explain a little bit of what's going on in wire fraud in the real estate world?
Yeah, so wire fraud is absolutely something that keeps me up at night. And I just bought a house actually on Monday in Florida.
Good.
And I had to wire a good size amount of money. And I'll tell you, I teach it, so I watch it, and I was sweating profusely. I covered every single track. Like, I was shaking and sweating, and mine took 4 hours to get through the Federal Reserve, which is long. So it was very scary. And I know it, right? I know what to do. So wire theft, the real estate industry is the #1 targeted industry in the world by these hackers. And if you think these hackers are just like these teenagers sitting in the basement, I will tell you, they are highly sophisticated, high-rise buildings full of people just trying to take your money. Real estate is an easy target because, number one, there's a ton of money involved. You know, I teach realtors and I say, if you sold $10 million of real estate last year, $10 million went through your communication channels, because that's how they get you through your email, right? They hack your email and they recreate. They're just brilliant in what they do. They're very sophisticated, okay? So you've got a ton of money. That's the biggest thing. You've got unaware parties, because we're so busy in the real estate industry that we're not double and triple checking that the email address that sent me something is exactly. Sometimes they'll throw an extra period in there, or a .gov instead of a .com, or things like that. And we're always moving. So in the real estate industry, a lot of us will stop at, Panera or McDonald's to look at our emails. Maybe we're looking at a purchase agreement. Maybe there's a settlement statement. Maybe someone got a closing package. Well, if we use Gmail specifically and Yahoo that have no security on them, anybody can hack in there, recreate a new email, and take your money. And it is so prevalent. I was actually just in Naples a few weeks ago, and we had two Secret Service there talking in the 40 minutes that they were talking, and they specifically deal with real estate wire fraud. They had 3 wire thefts in the 40 minutes that they were talking there. One was the seller's proceeds. One was the buyer's amount to close, right? Which I can give you many examples of that. But now mortgage payoffs are being stolen. And mortgage payoffs are the big chunk in a lot of these transactions of the money in a transaction.
So how can a consumer protect themselves? Because many title companies only accept wires.
Absolutely. So we used to only accept cashier's checks, and then, the crooks got really good at fraudulent cashier's checks. So then the underwriters in the title industry said, no, over a certain amount, we've got to have a wire. And they were fine until the hackers learned how to take wires. And I'll tell you what, it's so slick and so sophisticated that some of the best people in the industry have been taken for it. And the FBI will only have the resources to help you if it's over $1 million loss or part of a larger scheme. So you're out of luck if your money gets taken. And this is what it always is.
And there's no insurance, no protection,
well,
or nothing?
No, there is. So you can get insurance. And actually, one of the Liberty has a program. It's called the Umbrella Program, and we work with an insurance company working with that. It depends on the transaction. That's a whole nother podcast. But you can get insurance. It's not easy to get insurance, though. But so what protects you is being just on the ball, alert to everything. We've had to go from, we don't email wiring instructions at all. Mm-hmm. You can fax because they can't hack faxes, but we have to go back and do the old fashioned, call them up and find out, hey, here's our wiring instructions. Do you have this?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, some people don't care for it, but I'll tell you what, I'd rather you be mad at me taking 3 minutes of your time to verify your information and getting your $260,000 in proceeds than having someone in Nigeria have your $260 proceeds and you're out of it, right? So, and that's what happens, because what they do, it's almost always outside of the country. And how are they able to steal it? They hack your wire to their wiring instructions, right? Because you rely on, you think, okay, I don't know that that's not who it is. And you wire the money, they turn the wire, they turn into, it's actually a Bitcoin, a digital type currency that they can turn then into gold, and then gold into the currency of the country that they're from. Wow. And so it's allowing, so digital currency is great. And I mean, there's pros and cons, but digital currency is how these hackers are stealing money. And there's significant losses. I'm talking, we are in the billions of losses just in the last few years in wire fraud. So I don't sleep well at night.
Yeah,
with
that's a
wire
whole
fraud.
nother podcast, but we're going to wrap it up here, Carole.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners, could you give them your contact information?
Sure.
You are just a pool of useful information here. How can someone get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So again, my name's Carole Bullion Mincy, and I'm at Liberty Title. So you can reach me. My email is cbullion, just like gold, BULLION, at libertytitle.com. Or you can call our office at Liberty at 810-225-9597. And I always tell everyone, it doesn't matter whether I'm working on your transaction or not. I'm a firm believer, I'm 37 years in. Yep. Do I know everything? Oh gosh, no, I learn something new every day. However, I feel it's my responsibility to give back. Yep. And if I know something that's going to save you time, trouble, or money, just give me a call. I'll be glad to help you, whether we have your transaction or not.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Danielle, any closing words?
No, thank you, Carole, for coming. We greatly appreciate your knowledge, and you're willing to always share with the community.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to have
You've always
you back.
been there for us.
We're going to have you back on the show, but we want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time on A Smarter Way Home. And if you have any questions, you can email info@assistmyrealtor.com. Till next time, I'm Victor Bals and my wonderful co-host, Danielle Boote. We'll see you later.
Together and make this world better.